Hi, everybody. We'll go ahead and bow in. So we are on chapter 7, meditation, or Chinshin no Gyo, which is a series of different meditations. Um, and this chapter changed the ending if you compare the last chapter uh, it's actually chapter 6, but if you compare this volume to the last, you'll see some changes. And what I'd like to do is I'll read something and then we can start our discussion. Today, many people who practice meditation and pursue spiritual training with the idea that it will make them better people, more effective in their work, or more successful in life. Spiritual masters from the past would have found such a utilitarian approach incomprehensible. Any spiritual practice is not about becoming a better person. It is not about increasing your skills, being more effective in your life, healing old wounds, or being successful. It is about finding a way that leaves you at peace in your life and free to respond to others in whatever way is appropriate. And that's from a book from Ken MacLeod called Reflections on a Silver River. I personally like that passage. And I remember when I first read that passage in a class on a Thursday, John was in that class and he was completely befuddled because he had never heard someone say that meditation is not about becoming a better person or becoming better in their life or successful. And it really puzzled him. And I remember I was in a class with Curtis Sensei, and he would always sometimes throw out these little comments, and he went around to everybody. And he said, "Why do you practice meditation?" And everybody was commenting. And of course, this was I think right around 2003, 2004. I just moved here. He looks at me and goes, "Tracy, why do you practice meditation?" And I said, "Oh, Sensei, I practice meditation to become a better person." And he said, "Aren't you a good person now?" I went, "Oh yeah, doesn't quite make sense now, does it?" But I mean, that's kind of what my mode of thought. So when I read this last passage in the book a few years ago, I was like, no shit. Was I missing the boat back then? I mean, not that I'm making it now, but I was truly misunderstood. I was confused about what's the purpose of meditation. And you'll always hear Curtis say, "Oh, you guys need to sit more." And although I don't disagree with that, I would say be more consistent. Consistency in your practice is better than just doing a lot of practice. Just be consistent. Like it's like saying, "Oh, I'm going to meditate for 5 hours on Monday and then not meditate again for another 5 days." You can't build momentum by being inconsistent. So if you can just do 15 minutes every day, just do 15 minutes every day, or if you could do an hour one day and then don't skip the day. That's the one thing that Suzuki Sensei's training, I think, really uh, gave premise to. It really showed that being consistent is super important. You know, when he missed a day, he made it up. And he was a stickler. He had a little book that he wrote down like little dash lines, but he was a stickler on being consistent no matter what. So what? You're in the hospital. Checked himself out, went home and did his breathing, came back, checked himself back into the hospital. But that was his operation, that was his deal. That's what he did. So, meditation, we have, this chapter 6 is, we had breathing last chapter and now meditation, or this chapter, and they're basically the two sides of the same coin. So, with that being said, I'd like to just open it up and see, we can ask questions about anything. you know, whatever you would like to discuss on meditation.
Sensei, can
John?
you
Yes.
re- can you uh re re read the quote by Ken
Oh, that
MacLeod?
I started with?
Yeah,
Yeah, sure, sure.
thank you.
Okay, let me bring it over here. Today, many people who practice meditation and pursue spiritual training with the idea that it will make them better people, more effective in their work, or more successful in life. Spiritual masters from the past would have found such utilitarian approach incomprehensible. Any spiritual practice is not about becoming a better person. It is not about increasing your skills, being more effective in your life, healing old wounds, or being successful. It is about finding a way that leaves you at peace in your life and free to respond to others in whatever way is appropriate. Not that it won't do those things, it may do those things, but that's not the purpose of it. You know, you may become more sensitive, you may become, more apt to connect, easily to respond without reactivity. So, does that make sense to you, John?
Well, doesn't that make you a kind of better person or a better improvement on yourself, anyways?
But it's not, again, we're not talking about self improvement exercise here. Why do you meditate, John?
Mm. I'm gonna have to think about that because I always, I mean, again, always thought it's more about like uh not evolving, but working on myself, working the details of my life, and just kind of um, but not thinking about it, but just kind of like sitting on it and breathing on it, paying attention to myself, bettering
Mhm.
myself as a human being.
Um,
For
But actually, that what you're doing and what can happen in that aspect is you're just building a greater sense of self by doing that. And to think about it, it's when you're if you're uh, truly deep in meditation, you're not thinking about yourself at all, right? And that allows you to respond easily to others. It makes you more open to connect with others. The last sentence of his statement, it's about finding a way that leaves you at peace in your life. That means you're not going to be reactive. Your reactivity is not going to come up. That allows you to freely to respond to the other person in whatever way is appropriate, you know, because, you know, you, you don't want to come from a sense of, I told you so, a sense of, oh, yeah, yes, I know how to solve your problem, you know?
so
So,
then so then the result would becoming a better person, right?
again, I said maybe it might happen, but that's not the goal.
Right, right, right. Right, right, right. I think it's part of the journey, right? Like, yeah, it's not the yeah, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
You can say that. You can say that.
Hi, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, Lillian, you're laughing.
Well, I am laughing, and I laugh a lot. Um, I'm laughing because so much of this, has been a journey. I first started doing meditation because I was told to, and I trusted the people that told me I should do meditation. And, we asked so many questions along the way. And the one that always stymied the most was actually when Curtis Sensei would say, "This isn't going to guarantee that you get an awakening. It gives you the opportunity to have an awakening." And I think sometimes we get so caught up in why we're doing it or how, instead of just doing it. And that that itself is sort of a sense of freedom. We ask so many, especially me, so many questions. well, why does this work? How does this feel? What is that? And I just find that when we do this, and the key meditation is the meditation I do the most. It was the second one I learned because, of course, I learned key breathing first, and then the key meditation. And the key meditation is just amazing, and you can do it anywhere. You know, Linda Sensei was talking about how she does it early in her car at work, and she does key breathing, and people walk by and see her. Well, if you're doing key meditation, people might think you're just sitting in your car sleeping. But I love the key meditation, and I think I understand what John is Sensei is trying to say there about, you know, they're actually, I don't even want to say side effects, but if you become more centered and more aware and more calm through your training, of course, people are going to notice. You're going to notice. And that's just sort of what my feeling on that is, you know, and like you were saying, Sensei, consistency is the key. And that's the key to everything in life, to eating, to exercise, to meditation. And, but I was laughing because I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in the questions and the how instead of just the doing.
Right, right. Yeah, I can see your point there because it's when you start thinking so much, you get into that. You can get into that little hamster wheel of meditation, you know, and or judgmental. Oh, my meditation not very good today, or oh, I had a, this is I just kept thinking, and it's just, of course, yeah, you can't stop thoughts. It's think and come back, think and come back. And even, during uh, key meditation, I'm following my breath. I'm not making it audible, but I'm thinking about how my breath comes in, and I'm just kind of using that as my little tool, because there's many different types of meditation. A lot of people, I remember when Curtis Sensei first did, you know, uh, he guided people through meditation, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, that was so great! It was wonderful!" And that's because it got them out of their head, and they were just listening to him and following his voice, and that really allowed them to have a deeper experience. And that's really what it is. I know when I used to go to the Zendo in Arizona, the first 15-20 minutes was miserable for me, and then after that I would hit a zone, and it was really funny. I could feel my whole sense of self shift into a calmer, deeper level, to where, oh yeah. And I remember when I had an experience, and in my meditation, I was living in Arizona, and I immediately emailed Curtis and said the next day, I was like, "Oh my God, I had this amazing awakening," and da 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 da, told him all about it, and he was like, "Okay, yeah, but that's not what it's about. Please continue." Uh, so I was like, "Oh shit, I thought I had it there for a minute," you know. I'd sold it. I was like, "Man, I've got it, and I'm going to tell him I've got it, and he's going to know, and then hey, it's all over. I could just move on," But it was just really funny to have him go, "Yeah, that's not it." So, with that being said, Jan, how are you tonight? You're right next to Lillian on my screen, so I figured I'd ask you.
Hi, Sensei. Hi, everyone. I'm doing well. Feel like I'm just a beginner. I'm learning so much from these Zoom sessions, and I haven't been disciplined enough to meditate consistently. I have to really make it a priority to at least do it like 15 minutes a day.
Yeah, I mean, just 15 minutes a day. A lot of times people say do it in the morning because you're fresh, you don't have any, things going on, or, do it at the end of the day when, you're right before you're going to go to bed to relax, and that's good. You just need to find what's good for you. Because if, somebody says only do it in the mornings, and then it discourages you, then you're not going to do it. And, you know, when you find what fits your schedule, you're more apt to do it. To build consistency, I would say that's way more important. Building consistency of just 15 minutes, just 15 minutes every day. Then you'll be surprised. And that's kind of how I started and I was, you know, sort of ashamed because I had come to Maui, and of course, back in the day, they would just call you out. They would everyone who's breathing every day, please raise your hand. And if you couldn't raise your hand, people are looking around going, oh man, I couldn't raise my hand. I wanted to raise my hand, but I couldn't because I wasn't doing it every day. I was so like, I just really beat myself. What kind of student are you? You're coming all the way to Maui to train, but yet you can't even practice at home. And that's one of those things that we think we have to have this miraculous, I need to go here and have this experience, and then when that happens, then you know it'll happen. you know and actually you can just, it doesn't matter where, just do it at your home. 15 minutes. And I did 15 minutes. I started in 1997, 15 minutes from August to December, never missed a day. Then I said, it's a new year. What am I monkeying around with just 15 minutes? Screw it, I'm just going to do an hour. And I did. I did an hour every day. I did the Suzuki Sensei method for 10 years. If I missed a day, I made it up. And let me tell you, it led to some 3-hour miserable sessions because I'd missed 3 days. And I was miserable. I wasn't merely meditating, but I was able to tell people, oh, yeah, I slept for 3 hours. It was 3 hours of worthless time because I didn't do anything right. It was horrible. I was just thinking about how miserable I was, or how good I was. I was doing, I was falling into that really bad habit of congratulating myself, being a good student, and then also beating myself up for missing. I was on that roller coaster, and I can say, once you get on that roller coaster, it's really hard to get off, and that's not meditation. So if you just go, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to sit for 15 minutes and then even, oh, I didn't sit my 15 minutes this morning, or oh, I got busy or something like that. Oh, I'll just do it right now. Yeah, just do it right now. Everybody has lunch hour, 15 minutes. I'll just take a time just to sit 15 minutes. And you can do that. I mean, you can basically make your own schedule. You're your boss. You're the boss. You're the teacher. You are your own sensei. I mean, and you can make it happen, or you cannot make it happen. And I recommend you do, only because you'll see for the first time.
Thank you, Sensei.
You're welcome, Chan. So, Phoenix, how are you?
I'm good. I'm tired, but I'm good.
Yeah.
Good discussion. I do keep track of my sitting, and was feeling all good on Saturday because I'd gotten 15 days done or whatever, and I was like, oh, I'm on my, I'm going to do another month, blah blah blah, and then of course I didn't do it yesterday, which made it harder to do it this morning because I was all pissed off. But I just got up and sat for 15 minutes or whatever. But it really, I see it. I just have to wrestle with it. But it was really interesting last week when things were so stirred up, because I was sitting not just in the morning, but I just watched. There's a couple of those days I was just so stirred up inside, just like I couldn't sit down kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, if I feel like this, I should sit down right now. Right. And that I did a couple times. And it was just really interesting to just watch, to just pay attention to the storm inside me without giving it anything. And then that just sort of ends up, then I just, eventually I'm calmer. I'm like, oh, it might start again a little bit later, but I just hadn't, it was just so obvious to me what was going, that something that I needed to respond to this. Because I mean, it was good. I wasn't yelling at anyone, inside or outside, but I was just so so much full of feeling, and just to watch that like a storm was uh pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, those are when that stuff starts happening and you get all, you know, able to see your own reactivity, you know. There was I think it was a teacher, he said something of the sense that it meditation provides an opportunity to develop your attention. And in that attention, you can the first thing you'll see is your reactivity, how you react to things, what comes up in there, so once you're able to know your reactivity, then you can slowly, dismantle that reactivity, you know. But then, that's only half of the battle. The other half of the exercise is basically bringing that attention in your daily life so that when your reactivity arises, you can be present, keep one point, and connect with another person, versus uh, following that reactivity, to wherever that goes. So, just being able to, you know, realize it, dismantle it, and connect. That's those things. He didn't say exactly, the teacher didn't say exactly that, but that's what I got out of it. And I realized in my own practice that when I can recognize my reactivity, I go, oh, okay, that I don't want to go down that path, you know. So yeah, really good.
I just one more comment. I like the idea of making up the next day. Like hadn't occurred to me before, but it's just because it's like it's again just in the moment. Oh, I didn't do it. I'll do it now. We'll see
Yeah,
how that goes. I'll let you know. But it makes sense to me as just a different way of framing it. So
yeah, yeah. Framing it as such just once so you don't beat yourself up, to be defeated. It's not about winning. So there was a joke about two Zen meditators. They go and they sit in they're going in for this, 7-day retreat, and they sit next to one another and they're getting ready and they're settling in their, retreat for 7 days. And the one looks over the other one and goes, I wonder who's going to win the meditation tonight. Like it's like you're gonna win something at the end of a week. I wonder who's gonna win this retreat. I mean, I just got a kick out of that. I thought that was really funny. Well, that being said, Ilaria, you're down in the corner there. How's your day?
Good evening, Sensei. My day was good. My manual is not with me, and it's at my dad's house. And now that he's back from vacation, I asked him to mail it to me. But now I'm wondering if I should buy a newer version because my manual is like over 10 years old.
Oh, you should buy a new one then.
Yeah.
There's so many changes.
Okay. Yeah. I also could definitely work on consistency with meditation, just like a consistent 15 minutes every day. And I like that about like sitting down and doing it now if
Mhm.
you miss. But I feel like I would have such a hard time with that because I always have something to do.
But it's like this. This morning, did you put on deodorant?
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, Just think of it as that.
Okay.
You wouldn't leave the house without brushing your teeth. Maybe you would, but most people don't. Or putting on deodorant or something. If you give it that kind of importance, then you'll do it. But I mean, if you just think, it's just another thing I do. But if you actually make it important, it's like, going to class. I want to go to class, so I'll make an appointment to go to class. Like you always here in this Zoom class, always, you're always here early, you make a point of it. So it's just a matter of doing that. It's just, you
Right.
know, Toy Sensei says this is about willpower. And even in the book, it talks about uh, the three things, and that is the willingness, know-how, and capacity. And it is about, uh, he calls it key meditation, Kino Hishiho, or the method for strengthening the willpower. And that's when I first wrote this thing, I went Kino Hishiho, and I went, oh no, it's actually Chinshin no Gyo. And that's a chapter name, but Kino Hishiho is strengthening your willpower. And that's always what when Kuro Sensei would explain it to me, or when we were talking, he would say, key meditation, Kino Hishiho. And that's why I always thought of it as, oh yeah, it's about willpower, strengthening your willpower. It's just making it important. What do you
Okay,
think?
thank you, Sensei.
You're welcome. So Fincher, you're here. How are you this evening?
Hello, Sensei,
Hello.
and everyone else. Hello. Yeah, a really good discussion. I'm taking it all in. And I've just, because of this discussion, been looking at, I'm wondering whether consistency uh, is actually more important than meditation.
Well, it's like being a student. What's the first rule? Show up.
Really?
You got to show up.
Because everybody in all of these different pursuits, we beat each other up and we beat ourselves up and we look for performance and we look for, am I doing it? Am I not doing it? Is it real? Is it not real? Like your story, was that it? Was that it? And I really think that maybe that you get a lot more out of just consistency.
Mm-hmm.
You just show up. You just do it. And that in itself, this consistency of meeting yourself for 15 minutes, no matter whether it was good, it was bad, whether you did 10 or 15 or an hour or whatever, but that the character of consistency is actually so important, so that you can just leave it at that. You don't have to do well. You just have to be there with yourself. I think it's kind of like like class. When you're thinking about it, you're thinking, I'm going to go to class and I'm going to listen to Tracy talk and I'm going to listen to, um, everybody else talk. And then I have to talk myself. And, jeez, should I have a beer before I go to class? And it's not at all what I experience when I come to class. All of that thinking really is not what I experience. Just like tonight, listening to people talk, it's not at all what I thought. It's really insightful. And so for me, that displays a difference between what I'm thinking and what actually happens. So, I'm just looking at, consistency. If I mean, that's as important as what happens when you're there, whether it be in class or meditation or training or anything else, is that this sense of consistency in itself um, creates a reward that I don't think you can define. I think it just, it's just there. So anyway, that I'm wondering what people think about that. Just the consistency itself, and what comes of that.
yeah, I mean, that's the one thing we always talk about on, just show up, just come to class. And I always tell the beginners, if you just think about it, if you just come to class, you're going to get over this awkwardness, this I don't know how to do things, and next thing you know, you'll be teaching this class. Because that's what happened to me. You know, I just was, you could call it stubborn. I mean, I let myself get defeated. I mean, I was not the most coordinated person in the world. I was not the I wasn't good at techniques. I was not good at pretty much anything, but I just kept coming. I just kept showing up, coming to class, going to the seminars, and this is really interesting. I was living in Arizona and I was emailing Curtis something, and he said, "Oh, you should go to Japan." And I went, "Yeah, I don't want to go to Japan." He's like, "Why don't you want to go to Japan, Tracy?" And I said, "I don't need to go to Japan. I can just come to Maui and hang out with you and Suzuki Sensei. And I get better, more attention by going to Maui than I do by going to Japan." And of course, he didn't say anything to me about that. But that was my thinking that, hey, I got it pretty good training here in Arizona. I'm going to come to Maui, training for seminars and hang out with those guys. And I go back to Arizona and show off what I learned on Maui. I was in that vicious cycle. And I remember when I first came to Maui, I was in Suzuki Sensei and Curtis Sensei. They were in the office. I show up. And it was, right before a seminar, and I'm talking, and I said, and Suzuki Sensei kind of hit the desk and said, "Well, you're here. Good for you. You actually came. Like so many people always say they're going to come to Maui and train and live, but you actually did it." I said, "Yes, Sensei, I'm here." And I looked at Curtis Sensei. I'm here for 5 years. 5 years. I guarantee you 5 years. Then after that, I'll probably move back to mainland, open a dojo or something. But I'm here for 5 years. And Curtis Sensei just looked at me and he kind of put up his hand and said, "Let's not put a time limit on it, all right, Tracy?" Like just hold your horses. Don't think you're going to get something in 5 years. But that was kind of my mindset when I came here. I said, okay, I've got a goal, do this, A plus B plus C, and I've got it. All right, I'm moving on. No time to spare. He knew, and that's the kind of thing we get in these things, and what meditation allows us to do, it really allows us to step back from that sense of self that we've built up, because we tend to think of ourselves as a noun. A noun is a person, place, or thing, right? We tend to think of ourselves as a person, but we're not. We're just a series of experiences, a process, and we process our sense of self depending who we're with, right? So if you're with somebody that you were in high school with and they know you as the high school person, but you've changed immensely since high school, no. They still see you as the person in high school, and they'll draw that sense of self out of you, and then you'll be thinking, "Oh, I don't like this person that I am right now. That's how I was in high school." Or you'll bring up that reactivity that comes out with a family member. Trust me, my mom can bring out the worst in me sometimes. Your family members can do that. So it depends on who you're connected to. So that's why, we had that great class on Friday, about being one with the universe, about key is always extending. If you're alive, key is extending, being one with the universe. Well, if you are connected to the universe, whoever you're with, that reactivity is nil, zero. You don't react. You allow yourself to be a servant to them, so to speak. You're allowing yourself to connect, because that's all it is, brass tacks. Well, Gloria, how are you tonight?
I'm very well, thank you. Hello, everybody. I want to say something. Consistency as in music is just absolutely key, and I can see, and obviously in Aikido as well. But I would tell my students, especially piano students, if they didn't practice every day, even 5-10 minutes, then they lost something. And Rubinstein said, if I don't practice one day, I can tell the difference. If I don't practice for 2 days, my wife can tell the difference. If I don't practice for 3 days, then everybody can tell the difference. And it's not as obvious with meditation. And when I started Aikido, we were told that we should meditate, but there was very little explanation. If we had had this book with the beautiful way he describes it in here, and yes, Ilaria, you need a new one. It's different than I remember reading it before, and it just makes it very beautiful, and makes it easy to do, or easier to do than it can seem to be. The first time I went to some gathering, a friend took me, and they did meditation. I kept falling asleep. And I'm sure a lot of people have had that experience. So my first meditation was like over and over again. And so it was not easy. So learning to meditate or just to sit and see what happened took quite a while. But when I became really consistent with it is when I have made the greatest advances in my Aikido, my understanding of it, my ability to teach other people. I teach the children, and my weapons. And I think it came largely from that, just sitting with myself, just understanding a little more about myself, or seeing a little more about myself. It's hard to explain, and I have been told many times not to go into meditation expecting anything, and especially not expecting other people to have a response to what you're doing. Sensei talked about, Boyer Sensei talked about one colleague of his at school, and he had suggested, because she's kind of a uptight kind of person, that she try meditation. She said, well, I've tried that and it doesn't work. So we asked her what she did, and she said, well, there are these people that are, a real problem, and they're still a real problem. It didn't do anything at all for them. And of course, we had to laugh, because that's not the point. And I guess my understanding of meditation is we don't go into it expecting any particular result. There's no point, because that's not what happens. What happens is what happens. And you may not be aware that anything's happened, but sometimes other people can see it in you. And the consistency, yes, it is very important. Like this morning, I let myself sleep in it a little late and had an early meeting, so I didn't get to meditation until later. And I was doing a little bit of it before the class, And so the really interesting days are the days that you do your hour of meditation in the morning. I usually get up, like Curtis Sensei says, he shaves his face. I don't do that. I brush my teeth first, and then I wash my face, and then I sit and meditate. When it's still quiet, my mind is still fairly quiet. It really helps to do it when your mind is not racing 50 miles an hour, and keep breathing. And so I think recently I've become more able to do key meditation by myself rather than with a group. And like I said, if you just read those first few chapters, it's kind of like, oh, that's so much easier than just one point and then let it go infinitely, and then there and infinitely. A little more explanation to it, and it just makes it a little bit easier to follow. So if you haven't read that yet, you really should go back and read that. I think it's page 59 or 60 or right around there, but really well done. But yeah, consistency, there's nothing beats it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, I will say that this chapter on meditation was pretty much completely rewritten. Yeah, it starts on page 59 and goes to page 63. And I would say, one of the most important chapters in the book, I would say, probably. It's really good. And I highly recommend that you do read it. Thank you, Gloria. Kiyomi, you're right next to her. How are you tonight? Are you taking
I'm
notes?
doing well. Yes, thank you, Sensei. Thank you so much for the topic. It really helps me. And I'm taking notes because I think marking is a really good idea to motivate me to do every day. And also consistency is even more important than meditation itself. I think that would really help me too. Thank you so much. And not expecting is very good too, because this morning I'm doing it and it was a struggle. So at least I said, oh, at least I did it. That was the last word before I stood up. So I think, I'll try to see, how consistent I can do. And about the you read in the beginning, things you read in the beginning. Because I'm a beginner in meditation, I cannot comment, but for life, I can really resonate to it. When I was younger, I always wanted to improve myself. I wanted to better myself. So when I go to the bookstore, I always in the self-improvement section, and then, buy some books to work on it. And later, I think maybe since last year or a few years, the kind of desire has relaxed. And I think I'm living life just I want to be peaceful, and I want to be more natural rather than really striving for something, and not to bring too much stress on me because it's not really natural. So I can see that, not looking for, bettering myself. And I think when I look back, and what John said too, to be a better person, I think someone who has that desire, the person is already a very good person. I think people, who are not um, open, or who are not um aware of that, they may not even have that desire yet. So I really think that people who want to better themselves are already very, very good person. And those people tend to be, want to be even better. But it's already good. That's my comment.
I'm glad you're getting inspired to meditate and keep track. It's always good just to keep a little diary. Suzuki Sensei had one. It was just a matter of just little lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's all it was. And then other people use like a little day book, and they'll put down a little number when they meditate on that day. And if they miss, then they'll make it up. But yeah, it's always good in the beginning to keep track, just to show. Your consistency.
So I forgot to one question about meditation. When you are struggling, what point, when I'm struggling, what point do I decided that's enough? I mean, or should I just time and just sit through the time I decide? Like sometimes I feel so uncomfortable, and I feel like, oh, what's the point? I'm just so, maybe I should just stop now and get up and maybe do it a little later. So I'm not sure what point you decided not to just stop.
Okay, I can't tell you what will work for you, but I can tell you what worked for me. What worked for me is in the very beginning, I always set a timer. And a lot of times it was, I had a cassette player, and I had a bell, hitting a bell every so often throughout the cassette player. So I put it in, I know the cassette was like 30 minutes, and I don't know how far the little bell was, how far apart it was, but I would go hit the bell, and I used the bell to reset. If I'm having difficulty with whatever, when I hear the sound of the bell, I go, okay, reset. And that's, a lot of times if you're having trouble with, especially doing expansion contraction in class, don't think about doing expansion contraction. Just reset. Use the bell to reset your time. And so if you don't have that, if you're in the midst of a struggle, check your posture. Check your posture, because a lot of times, and I say this only because if your shoulders start to round and you start compressing your core area, it will inhibit your breathing. So a lot of times when people are struggling, it's usually from their breathing. And since they're not doing key breathing, they don't notice it so much because they're meditating, they're up in their head. But always from time to time, even if you're not having trouble, check your posture. Just posture check, and that can be done. And that's kind of a little game I learned to play when I was a beginner. Was when I was trying to learn good posture, I would do random posture checks when I'm standing in line at the bank, or standing in line at the grocery store, or standing in line, whatever. But then I carried it through to when I was meditating. Oh, let me check my posture and just do a posture check. And that may be it. I don't know. But, I think that's a good place to start, is because the foundation of your meditation practice is your posture, and your core being open with and allowing yourself to breathe. Because even though you're not doing key breathing during meditation, your breath has to be full. You can't shallow your breathing. So I'd try that first. So I can ask Vitali, how are you tonight, Vitali?
Hello, Sensei. Hello, everybody. I'm fine, thank you. It's very interesting discussion. It's very interesting discussion today. Meditation is very interesting point. Why I do it? Probably I begin to do my meditation because it was part of key Aikido practice. Just one of the part, and I begin to do it. I have problem with consistency, big problem. It's I do it sometimes 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times, but I have no consistency. And the reason why I do it, I don't know. I'm just do meditation. And I think it is the reason why I do it not consistent. If I have no goal doing my meditation, consistent doesn't have sense. If I have no goal, why should I do it consistent? I think that's a problem, but I like it. I do it because I like this. Because I like being be in meditation. I like meditate. What else? I don't know what else. I have problems.
I get it, and I know. I can understand what you're saying. If you don't have a goal, then why should I be consistent? Sure.
Yeah.
I think in fact, I asked that very similar question to Curtis Sensei a long time ago. And I said, "Oh, Sensei, I don't get it. What's the big deal about, meditation? I get, okay, I understand key breathing, that's linked to CoQ, and I want to have big CoQ so I can really crank somebody, I could really throw them around, that's my thinking. Of course I didn't say that at the time, but that was my thought process. So what's this big deal, And he was saying, well, it's two heads of the same coin. And he gave me an answer, and I kind of said okay with it, but that wasn't satisfactory for me. So I kind of asked Suzuki Sensei privately, Sensei, I understand about key breathing. You're really big on key breathing. I can totally get it, building your CoQ, but what about meditation? What's the big deal about meditation? And Suzuki Sensei was one of those guys. He would just kind of sit back, and he would always do this with his hands. He'd put his fingertips together, and he'd go, do you want to be a great Aikidoist? And I was like, he just hit the button right on the head. Absolutely, Sensei. I want to be a great Aikidoist. You got that right. He just knew me. He just knew how to push that button just right. Push that button. And I was like, yeah. He goes, all the great ones meditate. That's all he said. And I was sold after that. Okay, I'll meditate. I'm gonna be a great Aikido. So much so that I went back to Arizona and I was torturing people with meditate. How long did you meditate this morning? How long did you? I meditated 1 hour. How are you? You know, and I was so obnoxious that I actually tormented my best friend at the time, Mayumi Case. And I remember telling her, "So, Mayumi, how did you breathe this morning? Did you do your meditation?" And she went, "No, I didn't." And I said, "Well, I did. I did. Well, I guess you'll just be a great Aikidoist, won't you?" And I was just like, "Oh, maybe I'm not doing this right. Something's wrong here." But you see my point. You know, Suzuki Sensei had just the right way to get me to do it. But then, of course, it was my connection with other people that realized that, yes, there are reasons to do it. And then there's also reasons to do it. And I had picked the wrong reason to do it. But again, I would say just be consistent, just show up for yourself. And it's like this Curtis Sensei would say, it's like going on a date with yourself. Meditation is like going on a date with yourself. Who's the most important person in your life? Well, of course, you'd say you are. We all say that secretly. We all love ourselves very much. And really, that sense of self that you have is discovering that's not real. That's the big deal. You know, that's the aha moment that people kind of go, "Oh my God, what? I've been what? I've been seeing things all wrong." You know, and when you build up the I would say build up a rendition of meditation, you know, of consistency of, you know, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, an hour, then having like spikes of 3 hours at a time. You know, every year, you know, Curtis Sensei will hold a 3 hour meditation in Maui. We used to do it twice a year. And I even went as far as doing 3 hours a day for once a week, every Sunday. Before I moved to Maui in Arizona, I would do a 3 hour session every Sunday from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Right? So I get up at 3 a.m., do 3 hours of meditation, and at 6 a.m., go eat breakfast out with my friends. We'd all go there and have meditation. And it was, you know, we weren't meditating, but, you know, we got right. It really helped us it showed us what is good to do and what is maybe not so good to do. And of course, we want to find our own way. And that's all meditation allows you to do. It really reveals your way of doing things, which is one with the universe. So I would suggest consistency, Natalia. Consistency. It will work. I guarantee.
Thank you, Sensei. I will try.
Okay. Linda Sasaki Sensei, how are you? We're talking about meditation. Any good meditation stories there? I'm sure you have some. You have to unmute yourself.
I feel a little guilty, but I do meditation because I enjoy it.
Nothing wrong.
Yeah, and I will do it maybe 2 to 3 times a week. I can't do it in the morning because I have to leave the house by 5 to get to work. But I just came back. 10-hour days can be, by the way, traffic is getting heavier. And I like to do there's breathing involved for a while, but then I will do the quiet meditation and I try to bring down, that half, your mind thing. You cut the waves in half. And I like it when I reach that point of nothing and everything where all of a sudden that pain in my knee or my lower back it suddenly goes away, and it's like you're floating and it's such a great feeling. I still have that habit. I'm going, wow, and then I lose it. But, I try not to go too much where I'm surprising myself and wondering, wow, is that it? Is that oneness? So I like that feeling, and it's really neat because after a while you kind of, when I come out of it, you can kind of step back and think about your day and look at it from another third person view of how things went and what could have been done better. And, you know, I just kind of enjoy it.
Yeah, that's always good to know. Enjoyment is good.
I like that. It's almost slightly addicting to get into that state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you just want to go into that place where it's nothing and everything. There's no boundaries, and yet it's kind of like a void, but it's everything also. It's a really nice feeling.
Sure. And the thing it is, though, is to realize, even though there is, this good feeling about it that you can get kind of addicted to, this blissed out state, sometimes that's, a sign that you're just doing it for that instead of, bringing it into your daily, so to speak. Don't you think?
I don't know. As long as it, to me, as long as it relaxes my body, my breathing is even, and if I do the meditation first and then I go into the breathing, my breath seems to be deeper because I guess it relaxed my body. And
Yeah, no question. I
yeah,
experiment with it a lot. In fact, we did that in the last Wednesday class, to where I did meditation first, then breathing afterwards. And it was quite an instant reaction. Some people liked it, some people did not like it.
oh,
So
yeah. But I kind of like that because it takes away from a lot of distractions if you need to focus on something. And yeah, it's enjoyable. What can I say?
That's fine. I didn't realize we're almost out of time. This has been a very good class with a lot of information. I really enjoyed listening to all of you. Anybody else would like to comment before I close with a little story there?
Yeah, well, Sensei.
Oh, hi. Yeah, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Good morning.
I tend to struggle whenever my alarm clock goes in the morning, and I think, okay, I can meditate at 7 o'clock. Why should I wake up at 5:30? And every evening I go to bed thinking I'll get up at 5:30 tomorrow or 5. So when the alarm clock goes, I promise myself not to struggle with my thinking. Okay, I should get up. Okay, I want to stay in my bed. So I just try to focus on my one point and relax my muscles and follow whatever goes on in my head without judging it. And for some reason or the other, my husband always starts snoring and making it impossible for me to stay in bed. So I get up. So somehow the universe seems to just hit me over the head and makes me get up, even if I decide I'm not going to get up. So that's what I wanted to share today.
Oh,
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Yeah, the universe always knows. So I'll end it with a little Zen story that I found over here. So one day, Nangaku was a very famous Zen master, and his teacher was Baso. So Nangaku was visiting Baso's hut. Baso stood and greeted him. Nangaku asked, "What have you been doing recently?" Baso replied, "I've done nothing but meditate." Then Nangaku asked, "Why do you continually meditate?" Baso answered, "I sit in meditation in order to become enlightened." Nangaku picked up a tile he had found by the side of Baso's hut and started to polish it. Baso watched. What was he doing? And he asked, "Master, what are you doing?" Nangaku answered, "I'm polishing this tile." Baso asked, "Why are you polishing this tile?" Ngako answered, to make a mirror. Asu said, how can you make a mirror by polishing a tile? Ngako replied, how can you become enlightened by only doing meditation? At that moment, he had an aha moment. So I'll leave you with that. And I'll see you guys next Monday. Thank you all for coming. And we'll go ahead and close. Domo arigato gozaimashita. Thank you all very much. And I'll see you next week.